The South African photographer Ernest Cole died in obscurity in 1990, but he left behind a secret archive of over 60,000 negatives. I'm Thom Powers, and this is Pure Nonfiction. Filmmaker Raoul Peck is no stranger to this podcast. 8 years ago, he talked about his film on James Baldwin, I Am Not Your Negro. Last year, he came on to discuss Silver Dollar Road, about a black family's fight to save their land in North Carolina. His new film, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, looks at the South African photographer who chronicled apartheid in the 1960s from the inside. Cole then moved to the United States and published those photos in a landmark book called House of Bondage. But living in exile in the U.S. and Europe, Cole had a hard time finding his way. He even lived on the streets for a while, and he died in 1990. His work was largely forgotten until his nephew learned of a Swedish bank vault that stored over 60,000 negatives that Cole had taken in exile. How they got there remains a mystery. The nephew asked Raoul if he would take on Cole's life story. Raoul makes use of the newly discovered photos and Cole's writing to let the photographer tell his own story, given voice by the actor Lakeith Stanfield that you can hear in the trailer.
My name is Ernest Cole. I was born March 21st, 1940, in Pretoria, South Africa. In the 60s, every day, every hour, despite the dangers, I photographed apartheid without stopping. In their gaze, their gestures, I tried to find meaning. Chronicling misery, injustice, and cruelty had become my everyday. But exposing the truth had a price. It's called exile. I thought I discovered a new world, one of liberty and equality. From New York to the south of the United States, I photographed these bodies, these looks, caught furtively on the move. However, a reality dawned on me. In South Africa, I was afraid to be arrested. In the United States, I was afraid to be killed.
Ernest Cole, Lost and Found premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September. That's when I sat down with Raoul at TIFF's industry conference in front of a live audience in a session co-presented by The Ankler. In our conversation, he also gives us a preview of 2 upcoming films about George Orwell and Haiti. Like Ernest Cole, Raoul has also lived a life on the move. He was born in Haiti, and his family followed his father's work to Congo, New York, and elsewhere. I asked Raoul if he felt that as a form of exile.
Well, in fact, I never considered myself in exile because, my parents left Haiti in 61, my father in 61, and my mother and my brother in 62. So I didn't have a choice. So we never felt in exile in the same sense my father maybe felt in exile. I just grew up wherever I was. And also we were fortunate enough to have a Haitian community wherever we were. Whether in Congo, there were a lot of Haitians who fled the dictatorship of Duvalier and got jobs in Congo to replace the Belgians who had fled. And the UN came to Haiti and offered something like 400 contracts for Haitian professionals to go work in Congo. So we were the first, development, how to say that, development workers, post-colonial in Congo. And so I grew up between those worlds, and in New York the same, when we couldn't go back to Haiti for many, many years until 86. So New York was always a place where you could, be again within the Haitian community. So I never felt exile, but I know what exile means. Especially the older generation who, in one of my first feature film narrative where there was a character who would pack his suitcase every week and say, I'm going back next week. And he would live his whole life like this in Brooklyn, thinking he will leave the next week, which he never did. Usually you never do.
So, today, your film company logo says Paris, New York, Port-au-Prince. Like you occupy 3 different locations at least.
Well, it was always essential for me, and in particular for Haiti. Every one of my film, I made sure that Haiti exists. Whether directly in the making of the film or indirectly, I use Haiti in many ways, even to keep my sanity. So it was important to me that people know that I have an important place in Haiti, and that's still an anchor for me and my work. So a big backdrop to this film is apartheid South Africa and Ernest Cole's chronicling of it, and the conditions that made it impossible for him to ever go back home. A kind of cruel irony here is he died in 1990 with just a few days later was when Nelson Mandela finally got out of prison. So he missed that moment. Well, he didn't miss it. He asked, in fact, in his hospital bed, he asked the staff to bring him a television set so he could watch Mandela come out of prison. So he did get to see that moment. Yes, the same week, basically, yeah. For a younger generation that didn't live through the anti-apartheid movement, I wonder if you can talk about, what that movement meant to you. Well, it's sad to say because we seem to be experiencing the same type of resistance or let's say situation throughout the world about what is happening, whether it's Gaza or Ukraine and elsewhere. At the time, the fight was different because it was basically liberation movements. I was a student in Berlin, 17, so I was among the youngest. So I was educated by those elders, and they were members of the ANC, the SWAPO, the Sandinisten. All of them, most of them were in exile in Berlin, which was a very political city at the time. The Iranian communists fighting the Shah. So all these movements were there, and I remember, when you compare with the generation today, we were a generation who somehow knew that we were going to die. We were studying to go back home, and we knew what the price would be, to go back home, and unfortunately that happened to a lot of us, at least the older generation. I was saved for other reasons, but still, it was really something almost. There was no doubt about it, and I don't think we even talk about it. It was just what happened. Your country is occupied, your country is colonized, your country has a dictatorship. Your duty is to study, get experience, get training, and go back. And incidentally, it was also a time where there were two worlds, the East or the West. And you had to choose. There was basically no in-between. So most of the students, you would either go to Moscow, to Cuba, or any other of those countries to get also some education and training.
Do you think that was a choice for Ernest Cole? I hadn't thought about this until you just put it that way. The fact that Ernest Cole wound up in Europe and the United States, is there another alternate version where he winds up in Moscow or?
Well, because he was more in the Anglo-Saxon world, the people were, who were helping him were either British or Americans in South Africa. And also he was a bit religious, so in fact the disguise that he used to leave South Africa was to say that he was going for a pilgrim to Lourdes in France.
Wow.
And they swallowed that, and so he was able to leave. So it was mostly a kind of what is the opportunity you have to leave, whether it's, through any other country. But for him, it was, basically London and then New York in the 60s, because you said in the 70s in your presentation, he came to New York like 66, 67.
And then House of Bondage was published in?
67, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was incorrect about that. So you had said to me that you didn't necessarily know who Ernest Cole was, but you knew his images from that period.
Well, I still remember that image of this older white lady sitting on a bench with white only. That was one of the pictures we used a lot at the time. And so those pictures were, by the way, the only one at the time. He was not only the first black photographer to go as deep as he went into the many different places in South Africa, but he was one of the few photographers who even did that. And that's why all those pictures, even today, are still iconic. Later on in the 70s, 80s, there was a new generation of photographers, both black and white, who chronicled the apartheid regime and the daily life in South Africa. But Ernest Cole was really the first one who took that kind of risk, who was able to circulate and go throughout all the different layers of the regime and do his work.
So you were gifted this enormous wealth of images. Any filmmaker would feel like it's their birthday times 1,000 to have that archive, and you also gained hold of letters or diaries, a lot of written material that could kind of help you reconstruct some of his journey. Can you talk more about the texts that you were working with?
Well, first of all, when the estate contacted me at the beginning, I was deep in another film, and I told them it would be too heavy for me now to delve into that. But I decided to help them because they were in the process to recuperate all those negatives and material that they have got from Sweden. And so I found some money so that they could, numerize and help classify all the material at the Vic University in South Africa. Because one of the aspects of my job is also to try to preserve, to preserve our memories, to preserve our archives. And I think throughout all my films that was one of the main aspects. So it wasn't 2 years later that I thought, okay, there might be something deeper with all the different layers that I like to have in my films. And I could see the potentiality of that. And then we start, going through the material, the photos, the negatives, the book, House of Bondage. I realized by reading it, rereading it, taking notes that in fact it's the essence of his mind and his work was in there. The texts were absolutely strong, fabulous, and to the point.
Similar to the way you were working with texts of James Baldwin in I'm Not Your Negro.
Exactly. The exception there is that after House of Bondage, he didn't write much. And there was no reason for that either, because he didn't publish anything. So I had to find another way to approach that, because the decision was also let Ernest Cole tell his story himself. That was a key narrative decision. But then I have to have the text for that. So House of Bondage was the vertebra of that, and then we start and inquire, through family, friends, people who didn't know it was him, people who lived in the same house with him. So I think we got at least 60 to 70 people and interviewed them, but I didn't want to have talking heads. The idea was not to have them in the film. The idea was to have facts about his life.
For them to supply you things that could help you build his voice up.
Exactly. And then I was able to use that, because nothing in the part of the voiceover that I wrote is fabricated by me. It has to be authentic. I rewrite it in a way that fits in the film, in the poetry and his written, etc. But everything has to be factual. Like at the end when he speaks about wanting to commit suicide, this we got, like at the time we found a woman that knew him in the 60s and had lost contact with him, but for some reason they start talking over the phone. She was in the West Coast in the US. He was in the hospital already. And they start talking every day. And he was depressed, and that's when he talked about, that he thought about killing himself many times, and what was his feeling about life, about South Africa, about New York, etc. So all those information were important for us to...
And then you enlisted the actor Lakeith Stanfield, people may know from Judas and the Black Messiah and other films, to embody this text.
Yes, exactly. If it has to be Ernest Cole, I need an actor, not a narrator. People make the confusion. It's not at all.
Actually, Raoul got mad at me when I wrote a first draft of the text, and I said it was narrated by Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah, it's a different, because it's for the actor. It's a performance.
You wanted.
Yeah,
you were making an important distinction that this was embodying a voice, not just.
Exactly, and he has to be in the text. He has to be in character. Usually the narrator is almost a monotonous voice with distance to the text and perfect elocution. That's not what I wanted.
So I want to talk to you about using photography in film. Your early film, Lumumba, also used photographs in a strong way, also had a strong first-person voice in the film. Talk about how you're drawn to using still photography in films.
Well, first of all, while I was studying in Berlin, I used to be a photographer as well. I used to,
What were you training your camera at?
Probably, what was, it was more an artistic approach, and also, I would say, sort of how to document where I was. Berlin in that sense.
And to clarify, when you were studying, you were not studying an artistic pursuit.
I studied to become an industrial engineer, which I did. And so everything else was on the side, but the side was taking more room than my actual studies. So, and that was Berlin. There is, you had multiple lives, and the artistic and the political one were almost the most important. So photo was always at the center for me. My father was, a big hobby photograph. I grew up with, photo cameras in the house, from Haiti. Or also, I have strong memories of photos and my father taking photos in Haiti. So it was something normal
that
for
must
me.
be very powerful to be separated from Haiti, but to have photographs that would be one of the most tangible ways of holding on to the country.
Yes, and not to forget the country, not to forget it. I always use it, and I think in a lot of my films, those photos come up at some point. Even Super 8, Lumumba, Death of a Prophet. I use Super 8 films that my father had made and that I use as well, and so it was always a constant of my work. So I never made a difference ever. It's really it's the sense of preserving memories and your own history, your own personal one and the collective one. So I always consider that part of my work and part of any film I make, whether it's strictly for a European audience, but it's also for me, for a Haitian audience, always.
So you received this trove of 60,000 negatives. I mean, how do you even begin to process that?
Well, I didn't receive it. It was in South Africa, so I would, ask them to send me copies when I was ready to delve into that. Well, you have to start somewhere, and what I did was to make piles of different thematic, in fact, trying to find what are the, direction, constants, leitmotiv of his work, the way he functioned. When you see, how do you call that, contact sheet, you can see if he does 10 photos of the same subject, you can see which one he choose and why.
Was there any documentation that would kind of help you understand, oh, this is from 1975 or this is from 1985? Or
no, those, he was a professional photographer, so he has also a sort of book where he notes, for each photo, sometimes the date, not always the date, sometimes the hour, the motive, and some additional notes. So, you need to have that. So that we have, but when you have a whole contact sheet of 24, 36 photos, you have to make choices, and by seeing the 6 photos before or the 6 photos after the one he chose, it gives you an idea of what he was looking for and why he decided this particular photo was the one. So it's like doing some sort of forensic work.
I want to give audiences a little preview and conversation of some projects that you're working on now. Talking about history resonating in contemporary times, you've been working on a project about George Orwell. What can you tell us about that project?
Well, George Orwell is probably another of these people that had a vision about the world we are living in here today, and a very, like Baldwin, I always say that everything Baldwin have written is so exactly point to what is happening in our very complex world, and allows you to understand what's going on. Orwell is doing exactly the same. And what I did...
Was Orwell always an important writer for you?
Not at all, no, not No, it's I rediscover him. Yeah, I knew the novel in 1984, Animal
there's
Farms.
1984 and Animal Farm, which are
Yeah.
taught in schools so much as to almost become boring, like anything that's taught in schools. But then there's this other rich depth of Orwell's essays. So
Yeah, well, I started with the essays, of course, but in particular one where he said, "Why do I write?" That's the title of the essay, and then when you go through it, it's basically the story of a life, or how a guy who was a soldier, an imperial soldier in a colony, Burma, Myanmar today, is discovering who he is and what he is in that colonized country, and you can follow his intellectual and political development, and how he decided to change his life and be a critical of that hegemony. So and the way he continued his work to shed a light about the way capitalism, history, and the role of England and the Commonwealth in all that geopolitical world, and society and class relationship, etc. It's incredible. It's so current. It tells you, the concentration of media, the fact that there is no independent press, in fact, and that's exactly what has been happening the last 40 years. There is no, every press is in the hand of a few billionaires, and we still talk about the free press, So all that
I think we feel that acutely right now at a film festival where you see audiences experiencing all kinds of films, being incredibly excited about the films, and then the question rises: well, where are these films going to go? And many of them are going to have a hard time finding pathways to audiences.
Yeah. So all this have been written by Orwell, and so it was a pleasure and at the same time a shock to see that everything has been written, and you just have to dig that out.
Neglected him for a long while. Then what was the switch that made you pay attention?
Well, I was approached. In fact, this is a film I'm producing together with Alex Gibney, and Alex was approached by the Orwell estate to do a film on that, and we would have access to everything, so all the rights. So Alex called me and said, "Okay, if you're in, I'm in," and I say, "If you're in, I'm in too." So we decided to make it because it was so exciting to rediscover Orwell, and we knew enough about him and his writing to know what it could, or how impactful his word could be today. And by example, the whole character of like Donald Trump, you could totally illustrate. In fact, we use Donald Trump as one of the characters in the film because he fits perfectly Orwell's description. Not quite the Big Brother aspect, but the almost ridiculous fabrication of lie and newspeak. How they turn around words, and so I experiment a lot with that, and the what's the word in alternative.
Facts, alternative facts, yes.
That's totally Orwellian,
yes.
So we are back to square one.
Yeah. So that's one project that's we hope will come out next year, Orwell. And then going back to Haiti, you've spent the better part of the last month in Haiti. Can you tell us about what that project is?
Well, this is a project we started like 3 years ago. It's about the assassination of the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, by a group of Colombian mercenaries and Haitian American mercenaries as well. And you know, the story seems to be one that will not be explained, but for the Haitian people, that's an incredible trauma and needs an answer. So we have been inquiring for the last 3 years, and so the last month, the whole month, I was in Haiti, you know, shooting interviews and other, you know, and continuing the inquiry, traveling around, even though it was difficult because the capital is surrounded by the gangs. And it's, again, it's a story that enables me to tell the bigger story of the place of Haiti in the context of America, the role of the United States, the role of Canada, the role of Europe in, you know, in the existence of Haiti, which is a country that, you know, since its existence, since its liberation in 1804, have always been a problem for those major superpower, for one reason or the other. So it's a way to come back to that and to go all the way to the sort of cover-up that is ongoing about this story, because obviously several US agency is implicated in that assassination.
I'm just reminded, people in the audience might not know, that there was a moment in an earlier Haitian government where you held a ministry post. You were Minister of Culture, am I right?
Yeah. Well, it was in the 90s. It was the first government, democratic government, after the return of Aristide. Aristide came back, was president for 2 years, and then Préval was elected. And we were the first cabinet after these elections. And we came, no, I was not minister as an individual. It was a whole group, a coalition of leftist parties, and who asked me to be the Minister of Culture. And we went in there to make reforms and to make sure that we would not again have an authoritarian regime. And yeah, so it was a very hard time, and we resigned as a group after 2 years, thinking naively that it would change the course of things, but no, and it became worse, in fact.
I mean, can you kind of just talk about emotionally what it was like to be there this time under, you know, such difficult conditions?
Well, it's like becoming a minister did not change me in the sense that I had to adopt another persona. It was the contrary. To be an artist, to be a militant, allows me to keep clear eyes during the process. And it's like most of my film have been about power, and I have now the possibility to analyze power from the inside. That was a tremendous experience for me. It was hard, but again, I saw in real life what it means, what are the, you know, relationship within a power, you know, between a president, a prime minister, with the common citizen, etc., the lobbies. So you could see, like, it's like being in a theater, but being in the background, not in the background, in the coulisses, what do you say, in the, you know, where everybody is getting dressed before the representation. And so, yes, it was an important experience for me.
Raoul, as I wrap this up, I want to ask, you know, when we cross into middle age, there's a point where we recognize that we have more years of work behind us than we have ahead of us, and it tends to concentrate the mind.
When you say we.
Those of us who have crossed into middle age. And I wonder, how it concentrates your mind to think about, the time you have left, the energy you have, and how you focus.
Well, that's a question I struggle with more and more every year. I felt when I was a young filmmaker, I was working in a sense of urgency, because I knew there's no way we would have enough time to tell all the stories we need to tell. And at some point down the line, the last 10 years, I just realized the state of our societies, the state of the world, the state of this sort of tribalization of every society, whether democratic or not, that it would take another 1 or 2 or 3 generations, and then I try to make films that would survive the test of time, and that maybe in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, somebody would be able to do something with those films. That's really what have been my agenda the last 10 years, I would say, is to make films that survive, to avoid making products, products that you can consume and then forget. I want the films to create something. The film is the beginning of something that you will then build on that. Take a book, talk with friends, build a group, etc. I want my films to be instruments for further, fight. And so it's, and age is play a role. I am in a profession where you can work very late, and officially I'm retired, but I never work as hard as now. I work harder than when I was 40. So, but it's a privilege, and I use it, and I try to, and there is more urgency today for me than it was when I was a young filmmaker.
I want to thank Raoul Peck for speaking with me. His new film, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, is released in the U.S. by Magnolia Pictures. Thanks to the teams at TIFF Industry Conference and The Ankler for making this event possible. You can hear my past conversations with Raoul on episodes 21 and 170. If you'd like to follow what we're doing, please subscribe to our newsletter, Doc Voices, written by Bella Racklin. You'll find it on Substack. If you want to advertise to our 40,000 readers, send an email to listen@purenonfiction.net. Thanks to our team, series producer Hannah Nordenswan and web designer Cross Strategy. Our theme music is composed by Andre Williams, and our executive producer is Raphaela Nehausen. I'm Thom Powers. Follow us on Instagram and visit our website at purenonfiction.net.